양지 진보도는 유미종 요는 진보가 자다 다그러 다른 전도 실문 또 제자라기 숑잘.
To liberate sentient beings, please generate the supreme bodhicitta before we start today's teaching.
Let's start the teaching of the Lotus Sutra. Before the teaching, let me mention something that is important here. Perhaps after some time in the future, our book, Always Remembering, which contains the teachings of His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, should be said to be quite famous in Tibetan area now. Whether in various monasteries of different schools throughout the Tibetan world, both domestically and abroad around the world, and among Tibetans in many countries around the world we know of, they are all actively studying it with sincere devotion today. Many have received blessings and benefits from it through the years. You are probably also aware of this, whether on major websites in this day and age, or through audio and video media, or in monasteries, Buddhist institutes, Dharma centers, and schools around the world today, including on platforms of some businesses and individuals, people are all studying it. As for our Chinese edition, some work was carried out on it a while back, recently it seems. Perhaps after mid-May, many people have also heard about it and requested copies at that time. For a few individuals, we have also provided some convenience for them. At present, I don't have a particularly clear statement to make. But on our side, we are also working on providing everyone with a more practical and feasible method of study that works well for everyone. We hope to facilitate learning through various means, including some audio resources. Currently, at this point in time, regarding some of our audio platforms in use today, perhaps for a period of time before, they were unavailable during certain special periods. But by using some of our other audio materials which have been gathered and organized from our collection, we are also preparing to upload them for you. In this way, sometimes, whether people are driving or at work during their day-to-day, including some worldly meetings, all of these can be done during this process, allowing you to study while doing your own things. Sometimes certain worldly jobs and tasks can be extremely boring and repetitive, making it hard to stay engaged or interested. During these moments, you might find it helpful to turn to a Buddhist book or some related materials, such as teachings, stories, or passages, to enrich your mind and bring a sense of calm or inspiration. It doesn't waste any time. I think it's very meaningful. So today, I want to talk to everyone about this topic once again, just a little bit more. This book has already been translated. After the translation was completed, I noticed that many Dharma friends at our Buddhist Institute, in fact, almost all of them, have read it. Once they finished reading the translated book, they reflected on its contents and shared their impressions with each other. Many Dharma friends who used to know the precious Guru, His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, found that some of the words in this book are especially familiar. Many of them have been saying, the other day, a Tibetan Khenpo told me that after the precious Guru, His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, passed away, this Tibetan book of teachings has probably been the best-selling one, and you could also say it is the most widely circulated book in all of Tibetan Buddhism today. So I personally feel that this book possesses a unique blessing power for every single reader. It has been 13 years since the Guru passed away, but in our hearts we should not have forgotten any of this at all. As a disciple, after one's own teacher has departed to the Pure Lands, all aspects of him in his wisdom and compassion, including certain actions and certain types of smiles, even if you can't see them in your daily life during the day, you should be able to encounter them in your dreams at night while you are sleeping. This point can be proven by looking at history since ancient times, and our own practice can also demonstrate this clearly. So before this, I also wanted to briefly share this message with everyone here with us. I hope everyone can make thorough preparations in all aspects. The book, Always Remembering. This year, in every corner of the world, let us all spark a wave of enthusiasm for studying it. Let's see if everyone can study it diligently wherever they are in their daily lives every single day today, with deep faith and devotion at all times and in all places. Perhaps by relying on our own deep and unwavering faith, the immense power of aspiration of the great Bodhisattvas, and when the merit and virtuous roots of sentient beings are fully complete and mature, sometimes, even though a book may seem small, it can bring you a truly unique kind of benefit, and some teachings might not resonate with you personally in a particularly special way, for example, as a layperson, and for His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok might sometimes talk about monastic precepts or certain rules of the institute. But from another perspective, if you consider it from a different angle, it was the same when the Buddha was in India, just like in our Lotus Sutra. Some of the teachings from that time may seem quite distant to us now, but in fact, if we understand them from another perspective, every word and every meaning in the Buddha's teachings can be related to our own mind stream. So sometimes in our practice of the Dharma, the attitude with which we study is very important to all practitioners. That's all I have to say for now. Before this, everyone should make the necessary preparations and get ready to study in a focused manner. During your study session, you should try to share some of your insights. You need to summarize the content within this teaching today. I think after you study, you will receive many unique blessings and attainments in your life and practice every day that are very precious to you. Next, I will recite today's transmission of the Lotus Sutra. It's already been 10 minutes now. We'll need to extend the time just a bit later. Sometimes when I look at the time, I realize I've talked so much. I've spent 10 minutes talking about always remembering.
Vambu Gepa Denip Jondon de Jivian, Chodi in Korji Winner Bochina, Denjim Churtin, Shonte, Hondon, Potter Napian, Koryudon, the Tedon Samba Trava, Tana Duba, Meto Chambi Tower, Nartongo, Lagber Gembar Tower, Tonton Mambu Gemba, Lee Vaden Dam, Number Jerry Vaden, Stung Gembar and Bojim Chawarton, San Tardan, Jervoston, Raptor, Mumber Shone, Namka. Varnang nete tala tamali damadang zandanji raptum jongwa chite tamjidang dambanjiktendi kamda chabra gyurdo deyig digjim changwa yachin ji lakanga vardam bhagbra gyurdo mbojir nabdan lepshi ba ndartar te xerdang ngardang benjir yadang pugdang doi nyangbodang madig marbodang keka Rem churtin te samchi tsaksam ji he namla meto mandara dang mandara chimbo rinpoche churtin te lan toro ngombar rapton toro rinpoche churtin te len dendri drap shong te devjang shaba namna semba meto toba meto shoba tamji yang tando devjang shaba namna pongbo dang kamdang kimchit lasokba rapto shia mayo no ledan nyomomba pa dang maam jongach Shomain ba shadang chakdang chila soba nambram jirwa mayan no woga nangdar jiwadang shirurdar jiwadang chukdang nyewaram jirwa mayan no devjang shoba namna namka nam song der takba mayan ba martakba yang mayan no wonjang devjang shoba Rinchen mangwa shiya kara chakjir tong mamburum nyang lende ba tokba na nambar tokba tamchar charwa semchir namji tonji shir ngonjir molam ji wanga Chu nyambi shir dang semchana yongzir mambar shayu shir da devjang shakbi shkuna chungzit yang toba me devjang shaba namne yigmzha xchik yang maasong so jirtan dibi semchir nam kam soso wadang mobar namba na soba tamte devjang shaba la nyan do devjang shaba te na yang devjang gang te nye ji devjang te yang takbam ta dang yang takbam ta te那出去样当刚的人也当样的，他当出去样的那单不出去把马杆不出去南张所样的这个用色，对什么小吧，那么更个样，对什么小吧当同啊当没话当问题，什么那么结婚个三百用色，都不什么南了，单比去把马杆不南张的，他们根本全部单独，人不进去等得来站的你浪的那个逆凶哦，这样等的，晓得的把出去单比去把单比去把马杆不。 Jibshawe Juji Namjang the Lokbro Sonso, Lokbro Sonso, Lakso, Jondan de Testago, Tejan Sherba, Testa, War, Jibshawe Janda, Fion, Tenin Kurjubo, the Rumbochim, Churtin, Namka, Varno, the Batem, Tone, Gajum Gavadon, Tarawada, Chukdu Gavari, Tse Stalin, Tarmojet, Tene Tejan to San Hua Chim. Pupa Chimbo, Jibshawa, Hadam, Madan Hamayan, Hadam, Madan Hamayan. Yundam Jeban, Jirtin Wumsar the Kirde, Rene, Jondan de Landerkachoso, Jondan de Rumbochim Churtin, Chimbo, Ndurtava Shungwer, Jikanlaga, Yen Kanlaga, Jondan de Rumbochim, Churtin, Dele, Ndurtavi Jashunwa Laga, Terkaji, Soradam, Jondan de Jishan Zama Chimbo, Puba Chimbo, Landerkachi Kassador, Puba Chimbo, Rumbochi, Churtin di Nana, Dejan Shabi, Kur, Chigdan Diba. Jigson de Tim Churten de Di Janda Shung Boba Chimbo, Sharji Shosan Jitinji come Tong Bana, Jitinji come Rumbochi, number Tagba Jisha Yobater, Dejan Sabajan Bayon, the Berzobasan Jerenson, Mawa Jisha, Jonathan de Tir, Molum Derket, Ngabshan Jobana, Nye Tambachi. Pamakarbur Namjang, Shantu Sanwa Namla, Dambanda, Tobata, the Lanamipayan, Doberzoba Shanchu, Nibram John Mushago, Dambi, Matopati, John Mushago, Kungatsena, Tambichu, Pamakarbur, Namjang, the Tobati, Wood, Alanamipayan, Doberzoba Shanchu, the Young Sutra Kirchi, Molum Tower, Pobachimbo, Jonathan the Devils about Bayan, Doberzoba Renchen Mawaji, Yonson and Tibeti, Tenal, Hadam Chipinciting in Dunda, Derkachi, Derkachi, Gerlong, Yonson and Debana Devil. Lirzig Rambochim, Churton Chimbochi, Churton Hama Nam, Ngai, Shira Jishi, Mubro Shower, Puba Chimboyam, Jordan, the Tales about Jumbo, was not your ancient Mati, Nim Churton, Jishojin, Jitin, come Tamchet, Na, Sanji, Yang, Ganda, Tambichu, Pabmakar, Buchujir Namjan, the young Tabar Raptor Tombateta, the Ni Lirzigi, Churton Dom Chon, the Sanji Jordan, the Tambichu, Pabmakar, Bundir, Namjan, and Chaban, Kurji, Kurji, Tanam, the Sanji Jordan, the Tena Teta, the Tambichu Pamakarbu, Chujir Namjan, the Tomba, Ni Lirziki, Laxo, the Shavjano, the Shinji Labor, Pobajimbo, the Janshoba, Jabjamba on the Borzo Sanji, and Mawati, Kodongum Churtin, the Jitinji Mumjit, but Tambichu Pamakarbu, Chujir Namjan, and Dungi Japan, Kurji, Kirkundi win, Mumber Shonte, Tanganamka, Nolan, Laxo Jishajan, and Jonathan, the Shansu Sama, Chamber, Poba Chamber, and Turkish Sordo, Jonathan, the Rajum Bayon, Sanji TMT, Tejas of Kondo, Tago, Turkish Sorado, Jonathan, the Shansu Chamber, Poba Chamber, Turkish, Kapsardor, Poba Chamber, Jonathan, the Tejas of Bayon, the Sanji, Renchen Mawad, Molum, the Church, Tit Molum, the Tate, Kungatsena Sanji, Zanta, the Jonathan. Rnambatambi Jondan der Namatambi Chubamakarbo, Chujir Namjondan, Chapati, Senangil, Lirzim Churtin, the Tambi Chubamakarbo, Nyambi, Sherda, Dejan Sabar, Namji, Kandan, Rorati, Kungazena, Dejan Sabateta, Kurjola, Zigi, Lirzigi, Terapton, Dobroshon, Dejan Sabateta, Shopji, Sanji, Jansozona, Dejan Sabi, Chirish, Skulif, Chiramang, Tatat Bakan, Sanji, Jan, Tedana, Tedotamjan, Tamjedo, Zora, Dejan Sabar, Chura Tedran, Hanjik, the Nili, Zikim Chutindi, Kurujola, Tamber, Shawajir, Mulum Tabo, Jun Poba Chimbo, the divisions of Bills, Mambo, Choji, Sanji Jiang, Kam, Zanda, Zanda, Tonayan, numbers on Jim, but the Tamji under Dover Shago. Teni Jordan, the Shansu San Huasan, Wajimbo, Bachimbo, and the Kitchi, Jordan, the Dejan Shabi, Dejan Shabi, Tamzilla, Dr. Shirgo, Teni, Jordan, the Jartim, Zorfu, and the Wazer Shonte, Wazer, Hotame Basha, Jodin, Jitasha, Jarton, Longushimani, Ringishimani, Sanji, Jordan, the Kanto, but the Tamser, no, Sanji, Jantena, Shedi, Sergeant Boche, John Shanti Jamba, or Rejo, Tartier, Dan, the Lover of Jamba, Shansu, Jarton Mambo Yonsokoro, and Benja, Lavri, Barum Boche, not the last Jita, Yonser now. They don't know Sanji Jordan, they don't Yan Jambi, Simpson now la Churtomber now, Sanji Jan, they don't know. The Jartonga Yonso Gan now, Division the Sherlock show, don't Division the Hosho, don't Division the Never, Nupji show, don't Division the Nupji show, don't Division the Shunger show, don't Division the Shunger show, Division the Shansi show, don't Division the Stunker show, don't Division the Walker show, no show, Tamchin, the Resident, and he comes here to get no 目不更高龙古西嘛你等那三级中等的需要抽出点动作嘛不更高龙古西嘛你刚到去把对到他们就是那我对呢小姐对像小把这种办样都不是做不上的对到刚让个想就生会错了干啥了这个机会大概你的对象是把人群们个各种咁出把了小些些的几天几看们这的中等的对象是把这种办样都不是做上的实际的比干的多对呢上的中等的对到来到个giảm长的很几的对吧那你什么的什么几天几看们这办的时候说对到对的他们这当单边几天们这把人不去就想的了对讲不就别人啥就人不去那等当设计这자와 주바동 럼보치 지르보바동 드그동 메도 만다라동 만다라 침보동 근도 잠바 저저 예르기 지견바동 서지 급에 뭐뭐에 무그린 주바 중당 중키르당 중당 중키르당 중더당 중당 중 예르중 이런 거랑 야르보 푸중 교 메버르저도 르나보양 메버르저도 럽당종당 종 침보양 메버르저도 코릭당 코릭 침보양 메버르저도 리저보 르병 메버르저도 럼보치 르젠양 메버르저도 잠조 침보양 메버르저도 밥치당 밥치 침보양 메버르 용수저도 라동마당 하마인지 촉냥 메버르저데 샘치나 냐라당 던조 지연에당 신진지된 메버르저도 더더데 디체나 지든지 칸 맘제반더로 로아지도 기베 샘친 때도 탐지전 지든지 칸 잔덕도 거버저도 양덕대도 디바테는 마토조 되는 산지존데 잠정은 제바 잠정 잠정 와당 선반 지든지 칸 맘제반더로 샤오조 대정샤오장 좀바데도 름보지 존샹가 중나네 장지 대름보지 존샹 레레나양 호서 링아비르 께르데 야르가당 로마당 답마당 포바 름보 포바당 메토당 제외당 랍드겐 바테 름보지 존샹 레레 중나 생기게 차 황다 호서다 링아비야당 름보지 무견바 셴바테도 탐지 정 줄모 중지데 지브르르도 남잔데 동숨지 동진본지 딘지 감 탐지도 름보지 존샹 탐지지 중나 대정서바 남지 줄모 중지 지브르르도 데이제 동숨지 동진본지 딘지 감도 탐지 대정서바랍更为了中等的等是把世界的比知道兄弟他们吃等走吧那马呀喏的中等的对象是把这准备都不做上界世界的把的对象是比各世上中把的都国人知的学者他们知道三级级讲的需要动作你是别人压力是把当人不接那等到设计这是也个这边把当没动曼达拉全部然后转把当里拉这当里没动咁长话想话当里不把当对吧对三级学动作你是不得他们吃的抽当中间当中等当中当一人口当第二步铺张当没不是的人那不当是当中当全部没不是的是空一当过去全部没不是的第二步是没不是的人不接这样没不是的讲做全部没不是当밥치 전부야 매버리 용소 저고 타당 마당 하마인지 속냥 매버를 저러 샘상 냐라던 던조던 kiến 신진직된 매버를 절대 상지장 탐지장 상지장 찍당 아니다 송부 쇼 탐지장 리버 용소 저러 냠바람 냠가 라름 뭐지 나던 지정상 더 겸버리 저러대 정상 대동 하다 호츠들은 아비아르보 봉저 르전바당 야르가당 로마당 메토동 제베당 다노름 뭐지 정상 탐지지 중나 상긴 고리도 호츠들은 아비아당 바노름 뭐지 lep시비 전바 자다나 대바당 샘버리 저대 대정서바 슌바 남라 상종대的生给吃了节目中个学说南站的要想求这样几天看需要你是对种手把小姐的把用所跟我们咋多对种手把选择手把的到过了些的要想要求这样几天你看需要同中你是中间中的了当人过了当第二步转没不是接的人啊这么多啊那不你们也这样想是吧当中的东啊全部我好像他们的界限有点多是吧刚才看了코리기 당선 코리 첨보야 매버를 제르데리 제르보 르르병 매버를 제르데 르 첨보 장야 매버를 제르 잠수 첨보야 매버를 제르 밥치동 밥치 첨보야 매버를 제르도 하담마당 하마인지 초경 매버를 제르 샘전야라도 던조 신지시장 신진직된 매버를 제르 샘전대도 탐진 직ten지 강화장도 고도 상지지장 대동은 벤저를 보지 나다는 세르기 자주바던 저 예르기 자베 겸바던 메도 만다라 침보 건에던 힐랍제던 랍제 umbră 상하던 힐부던 도던 럼보지 존상 지버 시대 럼보지 존상 대도 탐지장 차다 호서도 응아게 보선게 저 응아게 대도 탐지장 umbră 저 럼보지 존상 그 중나 수수 선게 저 대정 서바 kirmo zhong zhe de zhi so yang de zhe ren zhong de zhe de ba zhe de zhang sha ba de dao jiang shu 쇼네 쇼네 지네 쇼와 적주야 동도 건고 신문이 탐지도 식소 대비전도 쇼지네 대비전 쇼바션바테도 야드나 양지브르 겨르도 디체나 야네 쇼비 대비전 쇼바테도 쇼르레 지텐지 감시야 적주건도 넘버 겨르도 되니 대비전 쇼바테도 그런 것은 게 틀라지네 그런 그 잠정 정전의 실제적이 다다 기회때 림보치 메동 퍼로 거르네 넓게지 가서도 리기외도 제대로 야르부캅기 셔고 풍부를 송때 대전서 받좀 바용도 부르고선지 실제도 받텔라 시험사를 라니 증대도 상식선 회 초당 양토기 초당 제발라 노바 뇽아마 닌뇽암 또땅 단남 데버르 르바라 니섬지 지라 림보치 풍부도 동에 데르케지 정전의 대전서 림보치 추바 침보 예위 따뜻 물로 지 소르지 대전서 바테도 탐치기 랑랑가 잠정 앞계소 대내 대전서 바쇼제트비 디 나브다 겁주라 임브름킨
Now let's continue our study of the Lotus Sutra. We have already covered quite a bit of the Lotus Sutra in our previous sessions. We've completed the chapter on Dharma teachers. That chapter mainly discussed the merits of upholding the Lotus Sutra. Now we'll move on to the chapter on the appearance of a jeweled stupa. This chapter on the appearance of a jeweled stupa is considered quite special throughout history. In ancient times, there was a text called Records of the Lotus Sutra's Miraculous Responses, which documented various inspiring accounts. In this collection, there's a story about Master Dayuan. He became a monk at a very young age. He ordained when he was about 7 years old. After ordaining, he devoted himself to studying the Lotus Sutra. He loved learning so much. Later, on one occasion, when he was reading this chapter on the appearance of a jeweled stupa, all the scenes described in the chapter below, with the many Buddhas appearing manifested right before his eyes. We'll discuss this shortly. In front of Shakyamuni Buddha, a stupa composed of 7 precious jewels appeared at that time. Then appeared emanations of Shakyamuni Buddha from the 10 directions. These are called separate forms, or emanation bodies of the Buddha. He witnessed all of these scenes completely. In the end, as he was reading, he himself experienced tremendous joy. After that, he remained in his meditation chamber for 6 years without coming out. Many great masters of the past were truly remarkable. He practiced through the method of retreat. Afterward, he made the aspiration to build stupas and to propagate the Lotus Sutra even more widely. He also wrote out the Lotus Sutra using his own blood. Later, he wrote the Lotus Sutra in gold. Among the assembly, he placed special emphasis on propagating the Lotus Sutra. This is also connected to this chapter. So as we read through this, those with good karmic connections may receive the Buddha's special blessings. This is one example. There's another text about the Lotus Sutra called Records of the Lotus Sutra's Spiritual Verifications, which also documents miraculous responses. This book also contains an account. There was a Dharma teacher at that time who devoted himself especially to studying the Lotus Sutra. From childhood, he had tremendous faith in this text. Later, when he was in a quiet place, one time when he went out on pilgrimage, he encountered someone who led him to another place. They said they would offer him a meal. When he finally entered a room, there was an old man. This old man set up a Dharma seat. He asked the monk to sit on the Dharma seat. He requested that the monk transmit this chapter on the appearance of a jeweled stupa from the Lotus Sutra. So he recited the chapter on the appearance of a jeweled stupa for him, reading it through once like giving a transmission. He read through this chapter once. After he finished reading, the old man was extremely grateful. What did he offer him? He offered him a walnut or something like that, and also offered him a golden leaf. Then he asked that servant from earlier to escort him out, but when they reached the doorway, that servant also disappeared. He was gone. No, wait. At the very beginning, when they came out, he asked, "Who was that old man?" that servant told him that he was Sun Simiao. Then, after a while, the servant also disappeared. But later, after he ate the walnut, he became long-lived. The account says he became immortal, but whether that's truly possible, in this story it says he became immortal. Also, after he sold that golden leaf, he suddenly became wealthy. A monk suddenly becoming wealthy. He became especially wealthy. Well, that might not have been so good for his practice. In any case, our Lotus Sutra, this story seems similar to one I wrote about in my records of Mount Wutai. There's a temple called Jingge Temple. It's on South Mountain near this area. The stories about its origins are quite similar. There are similarities with this story. Let me mention this here. The miraculous response records and biographies of great masters of the past show that indeed, through studying or reciting during this process, they received many miraculous responses and blessings. This is just a brief introduction to some of the merits of the chapter on the appearance of a jeweled stupa. Now let's move on to the literal meaning. Today, the content seems not particularly easy for me to understand, but it should be okay. Some stories, some principles, they're truly inconceivable. Some principles in the Buddhist sutras are very inconceivable, but we are very fortunate, aren't we? In our lifetime, the Lotus Sutra was spoken by the Buddha himself, and it's blessed by so many Buddhas. We're studying it together. I myself think this way every day. Perhaps my thoughts and each of yours are not necessarily the same, because from childhood I've been immersed in the wisdom of Buddhism. Although the Buddhism I encountered as a child wasn't particularly, it was more like folk religious practice. But regarding folk religious practice, I actually feel that the folk religious practice in the Tibetan region is quite authentic. There's nothing that contradicts the sutras or treatises. So as a child, I lived in an environment that wasn't particularly imbued with profound study and practice wisdom, not that kind of wisdom atmosphere, but basically I lived a life of faith. So perhaps for this reason, perhaps also due to strong connections from past lives regarding any principle of Mahayana Buddhism, I only have joy. I never develop wrong views. Toward any spiritual teacher who has taught me the Dharma, I never develop wrong views. I've never had any conflicts with them. Neither direct nor indirect conflicts. I never had such conflicts in the past, and now most of my teachers have already departed this world, so there shouldn't be any. So for me personally, I would say my connection with the Buddha is quite deep. That's what I believe. Because of this, regarding the Lotus Sutra, including texts like the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras, actually no matter what, whatever sutra or treatise I teach, or whatever Mahayana or Hinayana teaching I study, I have faith. This faith is not pretended. It's a faith that arises spontaneously from the depths of my heart. I believe the faith of many of you far surpasses mine by hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, millions, hundreds of thousands of nayutas, and so on. Let's continue today with chapter 11 of the Lotus Sutra, the chapter on the appearance of a jeweled stupa. Actually, within this chapter there are many wondrous meanings. Precisely because of this, the Lotus Sutra is difficult to believe in and difficult to encounter. So sometimes when we teach it, it's very mystical, but sometimes it's not really that extraordinary. Nowadays, when we look at any worldly thing, something with a story-like quality or something mythical or mystical historical accounts, whether it's a story, movie, TV show, or history, these things exist too. So it's not really that extraordinary. Sometimes when our conceptual mind finds something hard to imagine, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So in the chapter on the appearance of a jeweled stupa that we're teaching today, we just finished the chapter on Dharma teachers, and at that moment in front of the Buddha appeared a stupa made of 7 precious jewels. Its height was 500 yojanas. Its length and width were each 250 yojanas. It emerged naturally from the earth and remained suspended in the air. While the Buddha was teaching the Dharma, suddenly from the ground in front of the Buddha, this jeweled stupa appeared, standing tall in the air. It was adorned with various precious materials, various gold, silver, agate, coral, and so forth, all kinds of jewels adorning it. It had 5,000 railings, many railings, and thousands of myriads of chambers, small pavilions like those where we place Buddha images, such pavilions, and countless banners and flags adorning it. It was also draped with various jeweled necklaces necklaces. More than 10,000 kotis of jeweled bells hung from the top. From all four sides came the fragrance of tamala and sandalwood. This is the name of an incense. This fragrance filled the entire world. It looked especially magnificent and dazzling. It should have been dazzling to behold. We could say it was brilliantly colorful, an extremely beautiful stupa that appeared, and there were various banners and canopies. Made of gold, silver, lapis lazuli, mother of pearl, these are the 7 jewels, agate, pearls, and rubies, composed of these 7 precious jewels. Its height reached all the way up to the palaces of the 4 great kings. Above the 4 great kings is the heaven of the 33. The heaven of the 33 rained down mandarava flowers as offerings. The celestial beings all made offerings to this jeweled stupa. Now in our worldly realm, devas, nagas, yaksas, gandharvas, asuras, garudas, Kimnaras, Mahoragas, humans and non-humans and so on, a vast multitude of beings with all kinds of flowers, incense, necklaces, banners and canopies, as well as various musical offerings and such, made offerings to the jeweled stupa, paying respect, honoring and praising it. The entire jeweled stupa appeared like this. Then all the beings toward this jeweled stupa used various kinds of offerings to make their devotions. Actually, this jeweled stupa at that time was a particularly special manifestation that appeared before Shakyamuni Buddha. Now, regarding stupas in our time, speaking of the whole world, especially in countries where Buddhism flourishes, there are stupas of different shapes and different colors, made from different materials. The materials used are all different, especially in Theravada Buddhist countries like Myanmar, Cambodia, Thailand, and Laos. In many of these countries, they make many stupas from gold and silver. In the Tibetan region, there are generally white stupas too. You can often see white stupas after walking just a few kilometers. Nowadays, in the Tibetan region, it's also quite popular to write Om Mani Padme Hum on mountainsides. Actually, this has great merit. When we were young, we often carved it into stones, because this Om Mani Padme Hum, the heart mantra of Avalokiteshvara, beings who see it, hear it, or touch it, some plant seeds of virtue, and some truly attain liberation. So in the complete works on Mani, it discusses its merits, and in the Karandavyuha Sutra, it discusses its merits. They're truly inconceivable. So nowadays in the Tibetan region, many people love to write this 6-syllable mantra on mountainsides. When you pass by, you can now see them very clearly in many places. Jeweled stupas are the same. In the past, we specifically taught about the merits of circumambulating stupas clockwise, the merits of prostrating, the merits of making offerings, and so on. Stupas are truly the source of all merit. For those of us with faith, even when we see a stupa, if we just press our palms together, just as we discussed in the Lotus Sutra before, and will discuss again later, even if you press your palms together with a distracted mind, the merit is inconceivable. Therefore, in the future, whether you're traveling, going on pilgrimage, or just passing by, when you see a stupa of Shakyamuni Buddha by the roadside, this is truly a sign of great merit. In this degenerate age, sentient beings may not even encounter what we call the support for the Buddha's mind. We often say Buddha images are the support for the Buddha's body, scriptures are the support for the Buddha's speech, stupas are the support for the Buddha's mind, including vajras and bells. These are all called the supports of the 3 jewels. Among the supports of the 3 jewels, the Buddha jewel has body, speech, and mind aspects. In other words, representing the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, stupas are actually the symbol of the Buddha's wisdom. Inside them, if there are Buddha's relics, that's best. If there truly are no relics, when we consecrate them, we specifically place consecration materials inside the stupa. There are the 5 great dharmas and so forth. So nowadays in the Han region, there are also many, including in the northeast, the south, and these places. There are some building stupas and bodhi stupas. Of course, during the construction process, it's best to understand their dimensions and such, because the entire proportion of a stupa is very strict. You can't just build it casually. Even though they all look similar, if you build randomly, there will be faults. So you must definitely invite someone who understands stupa construction well. Their entire proportions and dimensions must be very proper. In the West, stupas from Tibetan Buddhism are now everywhere. Whether in France, England, or anywhere, there are stupas. Therefore, generally in monasteries or dharma centers, stupas, large and small, are very meaningful. When teaching the chapter on the appearance of a jeweled stupa, on one hand, we think about how in the Buddha's time such a magnificent jeweled stupa also appeared, and throughout history as well, whether in Tibetan Buddhism, Chinese Han Buddhism, or Theravada Buddhism. Although the shapes of various stupas are all different, in 1990, when we went to Nepal, next to the Swayambhunath stupa in Nepal, there's the relic stupa of Master Vasubandhu. That one follows the style of Hinayana stupas. This is also quite famous historically. It's somewhat different from our Mahayana stupas. So there are many different types of stupas, including in Bhutan. There are many stupas in Bhutan, but some stupas are slightly different from Tibetan Buddhist ones as well. Of course, most are very similar. In the future, I hope that whenever you encounter these stupas, you'll at least prostrate 3 times. You should circumambulate 3 times. Even making offerings of flowers, lamps, and such things before the stupa is very necessary. Otherwise, nowadays, some people, including some Buddhists, seem to have no faith at all. They casually step over stupas, Buddha images, and scriptures. Here we often have some monastics placing Buddha images and scriptures over here. Some may be lay people, some may not be, and then they just step over them. Those people also get quite upset, because when someone is looking at their precious Buddha image, if another person flies over it, they feel particularly upset. But some people truly don't know. If they don't know, there's nothing we can do. Actually, in this regard, truly, for example, the robes of monastics cannot be stepped on or trampled upon. Moreover, Buddha images, scriptures, and stupas must all be placed in clean locations. They cannot be placed on the floor. I often criticize people around me about this. They often place Buddha images and stupas by the stairway where people step. Those places are very unclean. Placing Buddha images directly on top of that, placing scriptures directly there, that's not good at all. So we should understand some basic concepts. Within Buddhist faith, we should understand these basic concepts. As a Buddhist, we must understand these concepts. Now let's continue. At that time, such a jeweled stupa appeared, and everyone joyfully made offerings to it. At that moment, a voice came forth from within this jeweled stupa. Excellent, excellent Shakyamuni Buddha, with impartial compassion and wisdom, you are teaching so many bodhisattvas and expounding the Lotus Sutra, which is treasured and protected by all the Buddhas of the 10 directions. You are proclaiming it to so many sentient beings. Yes, yes, Shakyamuni Buddha, truly so. Truly, as you have taught Shakyamuni Buddha, the Dharma you teach is truly real and not false. At that time, from within that jeweled stupa came forth a voice, how wondrous, saying, your propagation of the Lotus Sutra right now is extremely rare and very authentic. You are teaching it wonderfully. At that moment, the fourfold assembly, bhiksus, bhiksunis, upasakas, and upasikas, everyone saw this very extraordinary jeweled stupa dwelling in the air. At the same time, from within the jeweled stupa came forth such a wondrous, pure voice, because sometimes when a voice emanates, including when we transmit the Dharma now, sometimes when we listen to Buddhist music, or sometimes when we watch some Buddhist videos, or truly through video and audio learning, we ourselves truly receive blessings. Sometimes we see certain people whom we've never met before, but it seems that through communicating via the Dharma, compassion and faith truly arise in our mind streams. This is also inconceivable and very precious. At that time, these fourfold assembly members were overjoyed. This joy was unprecedented. Then everyone rose from their seats. They probably stood up, then respectfully pressed their palms together and stood to one side. Everyone just stood there, because hearing this voice was truly wondrous. Hearing this voice from within the jeweled stupa. At this time there was a bodhisattva, Mahasattva, called Mahapratibhana, great eloquent joy. In Tibetan it seems to mean someone of great eloquence, such a bodhisattva. Here it's great eloquent joy. That works too. Bodhisattva Mahapratibhana knew the doubts in the minds of all the worldly beings, devas and asuras. Everyone had some doubts in their hearts, because suddenly a jeweled stupa appeared, and inside the stupa no one could be seen, nothing could be seen, yet suddenly a voice came forth. What was going on? Everyone had such doubts. So on behalf of these humans and non-humans, he addressed the Buddha, making this request before the Buddha. Bhagavat, for what cause and condition has this jeweled stupa suddenly emerged from the earth and remained suspended in the air, and at the same time a voice is coming forth from within it, seemingly saying that you are teaching very well. Is that right? What's going on here? What's happening? What does this mean? Bodhisattva Mahapratibhana said before the Buddha, we really don't understand. What does this mean? Suddenly such a jeweled stupa appeared, and from within the stupa comes this voice. What does this mean? At this time, the Buddha told Bodhisattva Mahapratibhana, actually questions and answers are also very important. Nowadays, we often go out to schools and such places. In recent years, I basically teach for about an hour, and then if there's time, about an hour for questions. Of course, with questions, sometimes they're asked very well, and sometimes I feel my answers are also pretty good. Sometimes the questions aren't good, and the answers aren't good either. But in any case, when questions are raised, they actually represent many people's doubts, not just one person's issue. So by relying on questions, we can spark wisdom, this collision of wisdom. Of course, for the responder, there is still some difficulty, because without any preparation, questions just come, just like when the Buddha was teaching just now, Mahapratibhana suddenly asked a question. In such cases, sometimes, if giving a lecture, you can prepare a little bit in advance, that's okay. But for answering questions, some people deliberately try to make things difficult. They think ahead. I've heard that some people, for example, if someone is giving a lecture next year, they prepare starting this year. When the time comes, they'll embarrass that person in front of everyone. So sometimes answering questions does present certain challenges, but in any case, what we know is what we know. What we don't know is what we don't know. Sometimes we still approach it this way. In the future, I also hope that when our Dharma teachers are teaching, of course, if you haven't studied at all or your studies were very poor, if you can't answer well at all, people below may question this person's wisdom, including which college or monastery they came from. They may also doubt that monastery's education and teaching. If someone has a bigger reputation, but they can't even answer a very simple question, that could also be problematic. So answering questions requires consideration from both sides. So at that time, after Bodhisattva Mahapratibhana asked on behalf of everyone, the Buddha told Bodhisattva Mahapratibhana, within this jeweled stupa is the complete body of a Tathagata. In the past, going eastward through immeasurable thousands of myriads of kotis of asamkhyeya worlds, there is a land called Ratna Vishuddha, the pure jeweled land. In it dwells a Buddha called Tathagata Prabhutaratna. When this Tathagata Prabhutaratna was practicing the Bodhisattva path, he made a great vow. When he made this great vow, there's a passage at the beginning in Tibetan. He said, in the future, when I practice the Bodhisattva path, if I do not hear the Lotus Sutra, may I not become a Buddha. Then, after becoming a Buddha and entering parinirvana, in all the worlds of the 10 directions, first, he said, I must hear this Lotus Sutra. If I do not hear it, may I not become a Buddha. Once I have heard the Lotus Sutra and become a Buddha, when I finally manifest parinirvana in the lands of the 10 directions, wherever anyone is teaching the Lotus Sutra, then may my jeweled stupa appear before them in that place where they are hearing the sutra, and bear witness. I will bear witness to that Buddha who is teaching, and with words of praise I will say, excellent. At that time, when he was still on the causal ground, on the Bodhisattva ground, he made this vow. Later, this Bodhisattva did indeed encounter the Lotus Sutra. Later, he became a Buddha. After becoming a Buddha, after his entire teaching was complete, after attaining Buddhahood, at the time of his parinirvana, among many devas and humans, he also told the bhikshus, after my parinirvana, you may make offerings to my complete body by building a very great jeweled stupa. This is what he said at that time. Of course, these stupas, these worlds, actually they also have a changeable nature, because generally for ordinary worldly beings with very solid true existence, grasping things that were made at that time, placed there, buried there, there are many. In such cases, it may be difficult to establish, but this is also somewhat like a miraculous manifestation. It has a changeable nature. If all worlds are like dreams and illusions in the avatamsaka realm, the large can become small, the small can become large. In our era now, it's almost the same. Actually, nowadays, regarding the dreamlike, illusion-like nature, relying on modern technology, I always feel that many things nowadays are like dreams and illusions. Only the power of dependent origination can establish them. Otherwise, many things cannot be explained, including some of the technologies we're using now, some AI machines and so forth. These systems have very mystical aspects. At that time, before this Buddha's parinirvana, he told his disciples, after my parinirvana, you may build a stupa from my relics or my body and make offerings. Through the Buddha's transcendent power at that time, or the power of his aspirational blessings. In all the worlds of the 10 directions, wherever anyone teaches the Lotus Sutra, of course this is probably a Buddha. If we just teach the Lotus Sutra, it probably won't work. Otherwise, a jeweled stupa would appear in front of us too, which is hard to say, right? It should be a Buddha. It doesn't say here, but it should be a Buddha. Otherwise, in the worlds of the 10 directions, wherever anyone teaches the Lotus Sutra, it will appear before them. The Buddha's complete body is within it, and furthermore, from within this jeweled stupa will come forth the words, excellent, excellent. The Buddha told Bodhisattva Mahapratibhana, today the stupa of Tathagata Prabhutaratna has also appeared. It came to hear the Lotus Sutra being taught. Because everyone has heard this Lotus Sutra, because the Lotus Sutra is being taught, the jeweled stupa was able to emerge from the earth, and it is uttering this voice in the air. So at that time, the Buddha told Bodhisattva Mahapratibhana about this dependent origination and the preceding causes and conditions. At this time, Bodhisattva Mahapratibhana, through the Tathagata's transcendent power, addressed the Buddha. Sometimes the questioner has the Tathagata's blessings. They themselves may not necessarily be able to speak it out. Sometimes, when conditions come together, it may be the Buddha's blessing. Some people also ask me, I originally couldn't ask such good questions, but due to your Holiness's blessings today, the questions that I asked were especially well, very good. I myself find it inconceivable. Usually I can't ask such good questions, but now, because your Holiness is truly a Buddha, you are truly a Bodhisattva, a reincarnate. Sometimes their mouths are especially sweet, but in their hearts it's definitely not like that. You see, the Buddha's blessing. This Bodhisattva Mahapratibhana also relied on the Buddha's blessing power. He spoke thus before the Buddha, Bhagavat, we still very much wish to see the body of Tathagata Prabhutaratna, because within that jeweled stupa are the relics of Tathagata Prabhutaratna. The Buddha body of Tathagata Prabhutaratna is within it. Could you find a way to let us see it? Since you know this history, could you let us behold the entire body of Tathagata Prabhutaratna? The Buddha told Bodhisattva Mahasattva Mahapratibhana, Tathagata Prabhutaratna actually made a very important vow, a very profound and important vow. What kind of vow was this? Tathagata Prabhutaratna said, if my jeweled stupa appears before a Buddha for the purpose of hearing the Lotus Sutra, while that Buddha is teaching the Dharma, and if the fourfold assembly wishes to see my body, whichever Buddha is teaching, that Buddha's emanation bodies, because for Shakyamuni Buddha has very many emanations throughout the world, which means his emanation bodies. The so-called emanations, we call them emanation bodies, tulkus, his reincarnations. His reincarnate emanation bodies are teaching the Dharma throughout the worlds of the 10 directions. If they want to see the Buddha body of Prabhutaratna, all the emanations of that Buddha from the 10 directions must first gather in one place. Then my body can appear. At that time, his password or key, there was a requirement. It wasn't random. It's like some donation boxes in the Han region. The Tourism Bureau holds one key, the Religious Affairs Bureau holds one, the Abbot holds one, and the Finance Department holds one. When opening it, all 4 departments must come together to open it. There are 4 keys, so for the jeweled stupa of Tathagata Prabhutaratna, if Bodhisattva Mahapratibhana just says, I want to see it, it won't immediately open. It's not like that. All of Shakyamuni Buddha's emanations from the 10 directions, very many Tathagatas, all these Tathagatas must gather together before it can be opened. If not for this, through the power of his vow, there's simply no way to open it. So he said it could then manifest. Then the Buddha told Bodhisattva Mahapratibhana, all my emanations are now teaching the Dharma throughout the worlds of the 10 directions. If you all truly wish to see them, I can also gather them all together. At this time, time Mahapratibhana, who was originally someone who loved to speak, was especially delighted. He said, Bhagavat, we very, very much wish to see. We must see your emanations and prostrate to them. Quickly, quickly. We must see your emanations. We also want to see the Buddha body of Tathagata Prabhutaratna. We very much wish to see. Bodhisattva Mahapratibhana would surely say this, because at this time when such conditions come together, everyone makes requests. The details of this story are also quite inconceivable. These inconceivable principles, I hope many of us will contemplate them well and also read more of the Lotus Sutra, including the Nirvana Sutra and other sutras. At the same time, you should also study some treatises, because for us to develop true faith in the biographies of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas or in the profound meanings of the Dharma, we need wisdom. In Nagarjuna's Bodhisambhara, it is also said, regarding the Buddha and the Buddha's Dharma, one should not entertain doubts or discriminations. Though the Dharma is most difficult to believe, within it one should have faith. Among all the objects of our faith, the Buddha Dharma is difficult to believe in because it is very profound. Although it is difficult to believe, as Buddhists, we should also have faith in it. We should use the faith of wisdom, and it's best not to be superstitious. We should accept it in a very good way. So at that time, when the Buddha told Bodhisattva Mahapratibhana very much wished to see the Buddha's emanations from the 10 directions or emanation bodies, and also very much wished to prostrate to them as objects of devotion. There were two purposes. One was that these disciples wished to see the physical form of Tathagata Prabhutaratna, his body. On the other hand, the Buddha has emanations in the 10 directions, and all these emanations gathering together would open this jeweled stupa. Everyone was very willing for both of these things. At this time, Shakyamuni Buddha emitted light from the white tuft of hair between his eyebrows. Immediately they saw Buddhas in the eastern direction, in lands as numerous as 500 myriads of kotis, of nayutas, of sands of the Ganges River. The Buddhas in so many pure lands, and their lands have crystal for ground. They are adorned with jeweled trees and jeweled garments. Countless thousands of myriads of kotis of bodhisattvas fill these places, and everywhere jeweled canopies are hanging, and jeweled nets and so on are spread over the top. Very many ornaments hang above. Throughout these lands, the Buddha teaches the Dharma with a great and wondrous voice, and thousands upon thousands of myriads of bodhisattvas are also in these lands, teaching the Dharma to different sentient beings. The worlds in the eastern direction are all teaching the Dharma, pure, magnificent. You don't even hear about killing. You don't hear all kinds of unpleasant sounds. Also at the same time, they also simultaneously saw the southern, western, and northern directions, as well as the 4 intermediate directions, above and below, and so on. All these places in the 10 directions, the light rays from the white tuft of hair illuminated all these places. At the same time, they also saw the Tathagatas within these places, all teaching the Dharma. And bodhisattvas were also teaching the Dharma for our future Dharma centers. This is also very important. In the Tathagatas Dharma centers, we should teach the Dharma. You see, in the pure realms of Tathagatas, it doesn't say that these Buddhas and bodhisattvas drink tea or coffee or go to dance halls to enjoy themselves. There's none of that. It also doesn't say they're constantly making money or doing various things. When describing each Tathagata's pure realm, expounding and teaching the Dharma is very important. When describing the Buddha's pure realm, it's also like this. When we talk about a worldly country, for instance, if I were to go to America, being able to study there would be best for many people. If I go to England, France, or wherever, what would we do in these advanced countries? Some do business and such, but most people want to absorb some wisdom in these advanced or developing countries. This is what many people seek. So when we, for example, if you go to the Tibetan region, you go to India, you go to Nepal, wherever you go, on one hand, pilgrimaging, paying respects to Buddhas. This is very important. But on the other hand, learning a bit of knowledge is also very important. Some of you go to the Tibetan region. If you go there, you can also observe what the customs and habits of Tibetan people are like. Actually, when people go to different places, they all learn something. When you go to Africa, you can't think, oh, Africa is very backward. Over there, they don't even have clothes on their bodies. What is there to learn? But there is still much, much knowledge to learn from them. Therefore, at this time, I feel that when we go to various places, going with an attitude of learning is very important. Look at these Buddha lands. They're all expounding and teaching the Dharma. I find this very meaningful. At this time, the Buddhas of the 10 directions, these Buddhas, because of Shakyamuni Buddha's light just now, actually it represents inviting them. There has communication. Within this light, there should directly be some hints. There should be such information. At this time, all these Buddhas of the 10 directions each told their Bodhisattva retinues, O sons of a virtuous family, you all know that today I have already received an invitation from Shakyamuni Buddha in the Saha world. This light is not ordinary light. We're going there to make offerings to the jeweled stupa of Tathagata Prabhutaratna. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas also told their retinues. At this time, Shakyamuni Buddha's Saha world also became pure, with lapis lazuli as the ground. Sometimes through pure and magnificent power, everything can become pure. In the Avatamsaka Sutra, it is also said, through the Sugata's majestic spiritual power, turning the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings, miraculous manifestations universally fill everywhere, causing all worlds to become pure. At that time, adorned with jeweled trees, with golden cords as boundaries, dividing into 8 paths, and at that time, throughout this entire pure realm, the so-called settlements, villages, and cities, as well as great oceans, rivers, mountains, streams, and forests, all of these completely disappeared. Actually, in pure realms, these things don't exist. Everything was already purified, and at that time, precious incense was burning, mandarava flowers filled all the places, and jeweled nets and jeweled canopies were adorning the top. Many jeweled bells were also hanging above. Only those in Shakyamuni Buddha's Saha world who were supposed to participate, these bodhisattvas and noble ones, remained here. All other sentient beings were moved to other lands, including devas and humans. Sometimes when we hold the Olympics or large international conferences, many people who cannot participate are all relocated to other places. There are many such practices. Similarly, when the Buddha was holding such a great Lotus Dharma assembly, those who could participate were allowed to stay inside. Those sentient beings who could not participate were temporarily moved to other places through the Buddha's miraculous, wondrous method. They were moved to other places. At this time, all the Buddhas each took one great bodhisattva as their attendant. Each Buddha only brought one attendant. Taking one great bodhisattva as attendant, they then arrived at the Saha world. Each went to the base of a jeweled tree. Each jeweled tree was 500 yojanas in height. The tree leaves, flowers, and fruits were all very magnificent. Beneath these jeweled trees were lion seats, 5 yojanas in height, adorned with the 7 precious jewels. At this time, each Buddha sat on their own jeweled seat, and they spread throughout the great manifold cosmos, so very, very many. At this time, even the emanations of Shakyamuni Buddha from one direction alone couldn't all fit. Sometimes when we hold Dharma assemblies, we prepare in advance. There are several assembly halls and such, but later, whether it was last year or the year before when we held a Dharma assembly, it simply wasn't enough. Even lay people from one area alone couldn't fit. Later, everyone cleared out many more assembly halls, So at that time, Shakyamuni Buddha's Dharma assembly, because he invited quite many emanation Buddhas, and when there were many, the emanations of Shakyamuni Buddha from just one direction couldn't be accommodated. At that time, Shakyamuni Buddha also thought, in order to accommodate all the emanations in each of the 8 directions, 200 myriads of kotis of nayutas of lands, were purified again. Before, perhaps within one range of lands, all sentient beings were moved to other places and the lands were purified and prepared for seating. But at that time, when so many of the Buddha's emanations came, there was no way. So all these lands were also purified, without hells, hungry ghosts, animals, asuras, as well as devas and humans. All were settled in other lands. After settling them, we must definitely clean. If hungry ghosts and asuras lived there before, everything would be completely disheveled. Everything was redone with lapis lazuli as ground, adorned with jeweled trees. These trees were also 500 yojanas in height. Tree leaves, flowers, and fruits were also adorning. Lion seats were also arranged beneath the trees, 5 yojanas in height, adorned with various precious materials. Throughout the entire place there were no great oceans, rivers, Mount Mucilinda, Mount Mahamucilinda, Iron Ring Mountains, Great Iron Ring Mountains, Mount Sumeru, and so on. Everything was like one Buddha land. The jeweled earth was level and even, then interlaced with precious jewels. Many canopies covered the top, hanging many banners and canopies, and burning incense. In Tibetan Buddhism, we also often, when welcoming teachers or great masters, lead them with some incense. Some great chant masters or others do this. Various celestial precious flowers adorned everything. Shakyamuni Buddha prepared these for the Buddhas to sit comfortably, but it seemed there still wasn't enough room to sit. So again, in the 8 directions, 200 myriads of kotis of nayutas of lands were purified once more. Because at that time there were still so many, here too without hells, hungry ghosts, animals or asuras. Devas and humans were also moved to other worlds. In the world that was cleared out, lapis lazuli served as ground, adorned with jeweled trees. These were also the same as before. Magnificence filled the entire land. At this time, the emanations of Shakyamuni Buddha, hundreds of thousands of myriads of kotis equal to the sands of the Ganges River, all these Buddhas, all the emanations of Shakyamuni Buddha gathered here. Because just now there were Buddhas from the 10 directions. At this time, all the Buddhas who came from other pure realms were already full. We could also say that just now all the jeweled trees, all the lion seats above were filled with Tathagatas. Each of Shakyamuni Buddha's emanations all sat on their own dharma seats. After the Buddhas sat on their own dharma seats beneath the jeweled trees, they each dispatched their own attendants to inquire before Shakyamuni Buddha, and each of them held jeweled flowers, handfuls of flower garlands, to make offerings to Shakyamuni Buddha. They instructed them, saying, "O sons of a virtuous man, go quickly. To Gurdrakuta mountain in the great city of Rajagra, India, there is Shakyamuni Buddha," because they had all arrived at this Saha world, and then they asked them to go there, go before the Buddha and inquire after him. Wasn't it that each Buddha brought one great Bodhisattva? Then these great Bodhisattvas, the Buddhas themselves, didn't go first. It's like when we have some guests, when important guests arrive, today they've settled in. They have their attendants take their flowers and gifts to see the host. Then they told the attendants, "You go to Gurdrakuta mountain before Shakyamuni Buddha and tell him that I, such and such Buddha, have sent you. Inquire before Shakyamuni Buddha, are you free from illness? Are you free from afflictions in your mind? Are you well in all respects? Are your Bodhisattvas and your Śrāvakas and all these retinues quite peaceful? Is everything all right?" Inquire like this, and also make offerings with our flowers in these offerings. And you should explain, "I am the attendant of such and such Buddha. The main reason for coming is because you previously emitted light to invite us. Having come here, we wish to open the jeweled stupa of Tathagata Prabhutaratna." Actually, this is a very sublime Dharma assembly, a very wondrous Dharma assembly. At that time, each Buddha dispatched such attendants. Before the Buddha, everyone inquired like this. This is the content for today. In the Tibetan version, there's a bit more. In the Chinese version, it doesn't seem to be quite as much. The meanings of the Lotus Sutra that I've just taught, some you may understand, some you may not necessarily understand. But in any case, we should still accept it with a respectful mind. This is very important. If we accept it with a respectful mind, we ourselves will also receive such blessings. I've also seen a story in the continued biographies of eminent monks. In the past, there was a Master Fayun. When Master Fayun was just born, especially wonderful clouds and auspicious signs appeared at his home. So they named him Fayun, Dharma Cloud. He ordained at 7 years old. When I look at the Han region, I really admire this. In the past, people would ordain at 7 years old, 8 years old. I don't know if this still happens now. Even at 18 years old, you still cannot ordain. He ordained at 7 years old. Later, when he was about 30 years old, he taught the Lotus Sutra many, many times. Emperor Wu of Liang also greatly respected his teachings and his character. Later, Master Fayun went into retreat in the mountains. While in retreat practicing, he also very much wanted to teach the Lotus Sutra. At that time, perhaps there weren't many disciples, so he arranged stones in rows to be his disciples and taught them the Lotus Sutra. This is very extraordinary. Some of you Dharma friends are going to the grasslands to teach the Lotus Sutra to yaks. Sometimes this is also okay, but perhaps this was the manifestation of a great master, arranged stones in rows and treated them as disciples, teaching them the Lotus Sutra. Later, Master Zhigong, during Emperor Wu of Liang's time, Master Zhigong was very famous. Master Zhigong also had great faith in him. Once, when listening to his teaching, he said, "Your teachings are truly very subtle and profound." Master Zhigong himself was also very wise. He said, "Your teachings are very subtle and profound." Later, when he went to the big city, he had quite a few disciples. Generally, 10 years of studying unnoticed, one achievement brings fame throughout the land. So once he emerged, many people were very respectful, including when there was drought. Master Zhigong even had Emperor Wu of Liang. If Master Faiyun performed Buddhist rituals, there should be no problem. Later, his wishes were indeed fulfilled. There are many such historical accounts. So, in the process of propagating this Lotus Sutra, everyone should have faith. Some of the principles here, some you may fully understand, some you may understand halfway, some you can accept parts of the content, but in any case, we should accept it with faith. The Buddha said in the Avatamsaka Sutra, "The Buddha's emanations are inexpressible. The separate forms are inexpressible. The magnificence is inexpressible. And the majestic power of the 10 directions is also inexpressible." In the Avatamsaka Sutra, much is said about the Buddha's emanations and separate forms. Just like what we're teaching in the Lotus Sutra now, they're truly inconceivable. So perhaps now, if we speak in ordinary worldly language, I may not be able to explain it very clearly, and you may not necessarily understand it very clearly either, but in any case, we all believe it has inconceivable blessing power and inexpressible power. Everyone should have this kind of faith. Good, we'll stop here for today.
Sonandai tamse thobaya tonne ide jana pase kirgana jirano chupai jupun sonen droja
bandangara badna sadarda bandangara badna sadarda bandangara badna sadarda